In this video, I'm going to talk about an African king who attempted to mediate between the superpowers that were fighting during the Punic War, and he was trying to end the war, but then he ended up losing basically everything. He got destroyed, actually. I welcome you to my YouTube channel, and in this channel, I talk about stories that I get from ancient texts that I read. And at the moment, I'm still reading The Founding of the City by Titus Livius. This is a text that covers the history of Rome from its founding, which happened around 700, 800 BCE, all the way to close to 0 AD. So the Punic War was basically a world war. It was a war that was fought between two superpowers. Think today of the US and Russia. It was a similar situation. It didn't involve the entire world, of course, but to the people who were involved and to the historians who recorded this war, it seemed like it's a war that involved the entire of the ancient world, or the world that they knew, at least. So this war went on for a very long time. It's a war that was fought in a period of close to 100 years. And some sources say that the actual war happened in close to 40 years. Still, that's a very long time for a war to be fought. Now, as I've mentioned, the war was being fought by two superpowers of the time, and that is Rome and Carthage. Now, Carthage was this empire that emerged in the northern part of Africa, and it became very powerful. At some point, it did occupy some parts of Europe, in particular Sicily, and it was a really powerful state. Then Rome emerged. Rome initially was just a city-state, and then it grabbed so much land in the Italian peninsula. And after a while, it was this other huge empire, basically. And these two went into war. And the countries that were around them were forced to choose which side to fight. It wasn't easy for them. You were either with the Romans or the Carthaginians. It was so difficult to choose a middle ground. So you realize that countries in Europe, especially the Macedonian kingdom, some of them decided to fight on the side of the Carthaginians, and others on the side of Romans. The city-states in Sicily, the same thing happened. Some of them went on the side of Romans, and the others the side of the Carthaginians. You come to Northern Africa, the tribes there were also forced to choose between the two, and Livy in particular mentions the Numidians, and some sources kind of like implies that the Numidians were the tribe we know today as the Berbers, and the Numidians fought on the both sides. Some of them went on the side of the Romans, and the others were fighting on the side of the Carthaginians. And indeed, when you read Livy's text, the Numidians played a critical role, a pivotal, critical role in the successes that the Carthaginians achieved, at least in the early years of the war. They were very good cavalry soldiers. Livy does mention that. And both the Romans and the Carthaginians were so interested in having this tribe fight on their side. So initially, both of them had the tribe fighting on their side, basically. Now, the Numidians had two kings. They had somebody who went by the name Syphax, and then they had another guy who went by the name Gala. Now, Gala died as the war was going on, and he was replaced by his son, Masinissa. Now, initially, Syphax seemed to have leaned more towards the Roman side, and Masinissa was on the Carthaginian side. And as the war went on, the Romans were so interested in having Syphax come on their side. Not the Romans, the Carthaginians were so interested in having Syphax come on their side. And they kind of like tried to reach out to him and trying to make him abandon the Romans. And the Romans knew about this, and the Romans will send envoys to him, and they will want him to sign some treaties. And while he continued being on their side, he didn't really sign any treaty that confirmed that he was indeed on their side. So he would just avoid that. And at some point, there's this guy who went by the name Publius Cornelius Scipio. He was the Roman general. He decided he was going to go there in person and talk to Syphax and try to make him sign these treaties. Now, before going, he had fought a very good war in Spain, and he had basically chased the Carthaginians out of that region. And the Carthaginians at the same time wanted to have Syphax come on their side. So the day that Scipio goes to Africa to meet Syphax, the very moment he arrives at the port, because Livy tells us that this Syphax had his empire close to the Strait of Gibraltar. When he arrives, at the very same moment, Carthaginian general arrives, who was a very senior general, who went by the name Hasdrubal Gisco. So they arrive at the same time, and in fact, they almost fight there. Gisco, Hadrosbal Gisco, wants to attack Scipio, but he decides not to do it because this is a foreign territory. So he decides he's not going to do it, and both of them dock, and both of them alight from their ships, and both of them are welcomed into the palace of Syphax. And indeed, Syphax is so, you can say what, he feels honored that generals of the two superpowers are coming to him at the same time. And he welcomes them to his palace, and there is a dinner that is organized for both of them, and he forces them to sit on the same couch, which is interesting. And he tries to talk to them like he's trying to make them negotiate with him as the mediator. But then it seems like the Carthaginian general was ready for that, but Scipio refused. And Scipio said he didn't have the authority to negotiate on behalf of Rome, because those are decisions that would have to be made by the Senate back at home. But it seems like he just wanted out of that conversation, because he had come to talk to Syphax. It's not so sure that he had indeed been sent by the Senate. It seems like it's a decision he had made by himself that he was going to talk to Syphax. So maybe if he wanted to, he would have had a conversation with Hadrosbal, and maybe something would have come out of that. But he refused. But they did have a good evening, and Livy tells us that at the end of that evening, Hadrosbal was so impressed by Scipio's ability to talk and to have conversations with people and to charm, and he left feeling like Scipio had won over Syphax for good, and he left. And of course, both of Scipio also left. But Hadrosbal was also a very smart diplomat. He did come back to Syphax, and he used his own daughter. He promised to have him marry his own daughter, and he offered for Syphax to marry the daughter of Hadrosbal. And that happened, and it looks like Syphax was, what's the word? He found that offer to be an offer he could not resist. And he did marry this young lady. And through that, he became an ally of the Carthaginians. Now, Rome heard about this, of course, and Rome decided we are going to talk to Masinissa. Remember, Masinissa was an ally of the Carthaginians, but somehow they were able to persuade him to come on their side. It seems it was easier to do this because Masinissa didn't like Syphax, and when he heard that the Carthaginians had managed to bring him to their side, it seems like he didn't want to coexist with him in that space. So he decided to jump and move to the other side. So he became an ally of the Romans. And so the Romans used Masinissa, and they organized, and now the war has moved from Europe. It's now in Northern Africa. The Romans are trying to crush Carthage. And the Numidians, who are led by Masinissa, of course, are now fighting on the side of the Romans. And the Numidians, who are on the side of Syphax, are now fighting on the side of the Carthaginians. And the war goes on. At the end of it, Masinissa is able to crush Syphax, and the Romans are able to capture him. And he's taken to Rome. Scipio takes him as a hostage or a prisoner of war to Rome. And he dies there not long after. This was around maybe 2 or 3 BCE, around there. So he dies, and his kingdom is basically given to Masinissa. So that's how Syphax, even though he had tried to become like the bigger person and tried to bring Rome and Carthage together, and even had their top generals in his house and entertained them and tried to make them talk, he ended up being imprisoned, and he died in prison. Thank you for watching, and if you want to see more of these kind of videos, subscribe, and I'll be really happy if you like the video and share it with the people you think might like this type of content. Thank you.